Hello, you're watching Eye on Africa. I'm James Creedon. Here are our headlines this evening. Tensions continue between Mali and Europe. Denmark has now announced it will withdraw a contingent of 100 troops from Mali against the backdrop of growing tensions between Bamako, France and other European partners. We'll break down why relations to continue to be so rocky at the top of the show. Refugees fleeing violence in Burkina Faso have been coping as they try to start new lives in neighbouring Ivory Coast. An Islamist insurgency in Burkina Faso has caused chaos, with thousands fleeing in southern parts of the country due to violence that saw the president ousted earlier this week by the military. More on all that coming up. And a South African High Court granted a rural community an order to stop the energy giant Shell from drilling off the country's east coast. Now, a committee representing 5 Eastern Cape villages has been victorious in multiple cases, trying to protect their way of life. We'll bring you more on that story as well later on in the bulletin. Thank you for watching. Now we start in Mali, where tensions continue to deepen between the country's military junta and Europe. Bamako has accused Paris of falling back on colonial reflexes, as it warned the French Defence Minister to be quiet. Madame Parly had criticised the junta for provocative behaviour after it demanded a contingent of Danish soldiers to withdraw from the country. That contingent had recently deployed there as part of French and European efforts to fight an ongoing Islamist separatist insurgency in parts of Mali. Denmark has decided to go ahead with a troop pullout. It's just the latest in a series of confrontations between Bamako and the international community. Brian Quinn has more on all those details.
A decidedly undiplomatic rebuke on live television as Mali's military junta advised French Defense Minister Florence Parly to mind her own business and keep her mouth shut.
Mali today insists on respect for its sovereignty, and we invite Mrs. Parly to show more restraint and also to respect the elementary principle of non-interference in the internal affairs of a state. She should remember the words of Alfred de Vigny on the greatness of silence.
Parly had accused the junta of provocation for demanding the withdrawal of a Danish special forces contingent. The roughly 90 Danes had recently arrived to take part in Task Force Takuba, a multinational European effort of some 900 soldiers advising Malian forces and assisting them in the fight against jihadist militants. Those Danish forces will now be returning home, with their government none too pleased.
We are there at the invitation of Mali. The coup generals, in a dirty political game, have withdrawn that invitation. Unfortunately, it is a game that we see because they do not want a quick way back to democracy.
Relations between Mali and its former colonial ruler, France, have been on a steady decline ever since the junta seized power in an August 2020 military coup. The latest dust-up, though, is now casting doubt on wider European participation in North African anti-terror efforts, a key element of France reducing its own military footprint in the region as it winds down Operation Barkhane. That nearly decade-long mission to secure the Sahel region from jihadist groups has seen only limited success, with militant operations continuing to spread across several countries.
Our reporter James Andre is just back from Bamako, and he's been following these latest developments. Let's take a listen to him speaking on our set here a little bit earlier.
The international community is saying, well, yes, there are treaties that have been implemented, that were voted in Parliament in Mali in 2014. There was a summit in Pau in 2020 where all this was confirmed. There are some military accords that are known as SOFA, which is basically the rules by which foreign soldiers under French command operate in the country. So they're all saying, look, this is all very, I will say to you what the exact EU words were, a robust legal framework, and it included a formal invitation. Now, the junta is now saying, yeah, but that was the previous government. We were not asked. Now, the thing is, what obviously the foreign armies are going to say, and this is true, is that, yes, but the decisions that were made are actually not that easy to undo. But in any case, this is obviously posing a great difficulty to the forces involved, because how can you stay on foreign soil when the foreign government doesn't want you there? Obviously, what's happening here is that basically the junta is flexing its muscles for the domestic opinion because there is a set of a regime of sanctions that had been placed on the country by ECOWAS. And that, of course, is pushing them to try and have this narrative about restoring sovereignty over the complete Malian country, that they should retake control of their airspace and that they should be indeed in charge.
Burkina Faso's new ruling junta held talks on Thursday with union leaders as it attempts to build bridges with civil society after Monday's coup d'etat. Around 20 trade union leaders met for about half an hour with the junta led by Lieutenant Colonel Damiba. Now, this comes ahead of a regional summit that could slap sanctions on the country. Heads of the West African bloc, ECOWAS, are to confer over how to respond to the toppling of President Roch Kabore. Mutineering soldiers toppled him on the back of public anger at his failure to stem jihadist violence in the country. Speaking tonight, Lieutenant Colonel Damiba has said Burkina Faso will return to constitutional order when conditions are right. That's the latest there from Ouagadougou. Now, some refugees who have fled jihadist violence in Burkina Faso have found shelter in neighbouring Ivory Coast. Now, driven out by that jihadist violence we were talking about, more than 6,000 people have left southern Burkina Faso in recent months. They've abandoned, in many cases, their homes, their crops, their belongings, everything. Laurent Berstecker has more on their attempts to start again from scratch.
A few makeshift tents lie on the outskirts of Tougbo village in northern Ivory Coast. They belong to refugees hailing from southern Burkina Faso, a region plagued by jihadist violence.
They arrived on motorbikes with their black flags. They told us how we should practice religion, what we could and could not do.
Driven out of their homes, these families sought refuge in neighboring Ivory Coast, just a few kilometers south. They say they feel safer on this side of the border, where the Ivorian army maintains a constant military presence.
Back home, we never saw the army, but when we arrived here, soldiers came to welcome us and to reassure us.
Most of these refugees left everything behind. They rely on aid from the Ivorian government and the United Nations to get by. But resources are scarce, and with few opportunities for employment, many are struggling to make ends meet.
We found a place to stay, but the problem is food. The money we brought with us has run out. We have nothing left.
Some 6,000 refugees have arrived in Tougbo over the past 6 months, highlighting Burkina Faso's failure to contain the ongoing security crisis. A crisis which the country's new military junta has vowed to tackle after overthrowing President Roch Kabore.
The death toll from a storm that struck 3 southern African countries has risen to around 80 as emergency teams battle to help tens of thousands of victims. Tropical storm Anna first made landfall in Madagascar before ploughing into Mozambique and Malawi. Rescue workers and authorities across the 3 countries were still assessing the full extent of the damage. Tens of thousands of homes have been badly damaged and infrastructure also badly affected. A protester has been shot dead in the Sudanese capital, Khartoum, during anti-coup demonstrations there. The death brings the total number of protesters that have died since an October coup to 78. That's according to the Central Committee of Sudanese Doctors. A South African High Court granted a rural community an order to stop the energy giant Shell from drilling off the country's eastern coast. The Amadiba Crisis Committee, representing 5 Eastern Cape villages, has been victorious multiple times in court applications against energy companies. But the country's Minister of Mineral Resources and Energy has appealed this latest ruling. Gwede Mantashe says those who oppose Shell are halting economic development in the area. Our reporters met the community leaders who argue that the wealth they want to see preserved is a clean environment.
The Mpondo people have been farming on the east coast of South Africa for centuries. When a mining company started prospecting for titanium in 2007, their farmlands were destroyed. That's when Nonhle Mbutuma became the spokesperson for a committee representing 5 villages.
That was not an agreement with the community. We just go to them and push them out in our fields.
They've been in court battles to protect their ancestral land ever since. In 2018, a judge ruled that mining can't go ahead here without local consent.
Sea is not only the livelihood for us. Sea also It's part of our spiritual place, our healing place, because our ancestors are residing in the ocean. In order to speak to our ancestors, we come here.
A month ago, this small community stopped Shell from looking for offshore gas reserves along this coast. The High Court ruled that the energy company failed to consult with the affected communities. Shell has been ordered to produce environmental authorization reports. Scientists have recently warned that offshore gas exploration causes real harm to marine life. This is what filmmaker and activist Janet Solomon found when she investigated whale beachings in 2016.
Science has shown that planktonic life gets completely wiped out in seismic survey. And also krill. 40% of krill gets wiped out. So it's from the small stuff all the way through to the big stuff as well.
The exploration is done through seismic surveying, the continuous blasting of towed air guns into the sea floor. Activists demand that South Africa stops all fossil fuel exploration to combat climate change. But the Petroleum Agency of South Africa says this can't happen overnight.
The import of gas, crude oil, as well as the refined product is the single biggest contributor to our balance of payments. And the government has identified it as key that we start producing our own oil and gas.
This government regulating body welcomes the opportunity to strengthen community consultation guidelines, but offshore gas exploration will continue along South Africa's coast.
Nadine Taron there with that report. That brings us to the end of this edition of Eye on Africa. Thank you for watching.
Тенденция государства российского в данный момент идет на сокрытие исторической правды.
The Gulag saw millions detained and tortured during decades until 1953. Though the repressions of Stalin may seem like a distant memory, historical truth is still a struggle.
Вот все, что осталось от двухэтажного дома, где мы планировали жить после судебных разбирательств с сотрудниками полиции.
And in modern-day Russia, many live in fear of a state that silences all criticism.
Чтобы вот так в 21 век, пока вот самого не коснется, никогда никто не поверит.
Watch The Gulag Revisited on France 24 and France24.com.